A royal guard in full ceremonial dress walks into a London courthouse carrying a sealed document that's been hidden for a decade. Corporal Alex Rowley has just filed a $300 million lawsuit against Senator JD Vance, breaking a decade-long silence about something that happened during a routine ceremony at Buckingham Palace. What truth has he kept buried since that Windsor ceremony? For 10 years, Rowley kept his oath of silence, but Vance's mocking comments about guards being well-dressed lawn ornaments pushed him too far. What secret has this decorated soldier been hiding, and why is he willing to risk everything to expose the truth about what really happened that day? If you're hooked, make sure to like this video, subscribe for more unbelievable stories, and drop a comment letting us know where in the world you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. A single comment made thousands of miles away would shatter a decade of silence and launch the most unexpected legal battle in recent memory. The stage lights blazed hot against JD Vance's face as he gripped the podium at the corporate dinner, his voice echoing through the room filled with influential donors and political allies. The crowd had been eating up his critiques of foreign spending and ceremonial waste when Vance delivered the line that would change everything. "We send billions overseas while they parade around well-dressed lawn ornaments in fancy hats," Vance declared, his trademark smirk spreading across his face as laughter rippled through the audience. "But hey, at least they're good at standing still. Maybe we should borrow one for Congress." The crowd roared its approval, phones capturing every word as Vance basked in the applause. He had no idea that his satirical jab would soon reach someone who knew the real truth about what those guards actually do. The dinner footage spread across social media within hours, clips shared and reshared until the mocking words traveled across the Atlantic Ocean to reach the ears of someone whose life had been forever changed by the silent dedication of those very same guards. In his modest flat in South London, Corporal Alex Rowley sat in his worn armchair, watching the video on his tablet as the familiar weight of his service medals pressed against his chest through his civilian shirt. The sparse apartment reflected a veteran's life of quiet dignity and unwavering service. Vance's confidence in his protected speech was absolute. His communications team had already prepared standard responses about satirical commentary and First Amendment rights, treating the whole thing as another successful soundbite that would play well with his base. "It's obviously hyperbole," his press secretary would later explain to reporters. "I am simply pointing out that there's a difference between actual military service and well-performance art," Vance himself would later state, seeming amused by the minor controversy as he retweeted supporters who praised his willingness to speak uncomfortable truths about foreign spending. The stark contrast between Vance's brash public persona and the quiet dignity of the Royal Guard tradition couldn't have been more pronounced. While Vance commanded attention through bold statements and political theater, the guards he mocked had spent centuries perfecting the art of invisible service. Their scarlet tunics and bearskin hats represented not just ceremony, but a living connection to duty that transcended personal recognition. Each guard who stood at Buckingham Palace or Windsor Castle carried with him the weight of generations who had served in silence. Rowley replayed the video 3 times, his jaw tightening with each viewing as Vance's laughter echoed through his small living room. Something stirred within him that he had never dared admit, a truth that had been buried beneath years of disciplined silence. The internal struggle that followed consumed Rowley for days as he weighed his sacred oath of silence against his burning need to defend his brothers in arms. He had sworn to keep certain secrets, to let his actions speak louder than any words ever could. But watching Vance dismiss their sacrifice as mere pageantry felt like watching someone mock a funeral while the mourners stood in respectful silence. His fellow guards called him throughout the week, their voices carrying the same mixture of anger and resignation that Rowley felt in his bones. "Let it go, Alex," his former sergeant advised during one late-night conversation. "We've heard worse, and we'll hear worse again. That's not why we serve." But something about Vance's smug certainty that his words carried no consequences gnawed at Rowley in a way that previous insults never had. This wasn't just about hurt feelings or wounded pride. What happened next would reveal the true stakes of Vance's careless mockery. Rowley realized that his decade of silence had protected more than just military protocols and national security secrets. It had shielded the American people from knowing how close they had come to an international crisis that could have changed the course of history. The incident that occurred during a seemingly routine changing of the guard ceremony had never been made public, buried in classified files that praised Rowley's quick thinking and absolute discretion. The emotional weight of carrying that secret alone for 10 years had taken its toll on Rowley's shoulders, but he had accepted it as the price of service. Now, watching Vance reduce his sacrifice to a punchline, Rowley felt something crack inside his chest. The oath that had sustained him through sleepless nights and silent anniversaries suddenly seemed less important than the truth that demanded to be heard. His brothers deserved better than to be dismissed as decoration by someone who had never faced the split-second decisions that separated ceremony from catastrophe. The moment Rowley made his fateful decision arrived on a gray Tuesday morning as he sat with his morning tea, staring at Vance's face frozen on his tablet screen. He crossed a personal threshold that morning, one that transformed him from a silent guardian into something far more dangerous to Vance's political future. Rowley reached for his phone and dialed the number for a solicitor he had researched the night before, his voice steady as he explained that he needed to file a lawsuit that would force the truth into the light. Soon, two very different worlds would collide in a London courthouse. The Royal Courts of Justice would witness an unprecedented legal showdown between a decorated soldier and one of America's most powerful politicians. The wood-paneled courtroom carries the weight of centuries of British justice, its narrow windows filtering gray morning light across worn benches and time-darkened portraits of long-dead judges. At the plaintiff's table sits Corporal Alex Rowley in his immaculate ceremonial uniform, the scarlet tunic pressed to perfection with brass buttons gleaming and his bearskin hat resting beside neatly arranged legal documents. Across the aisle, JD Vance commands attention with his perfectly tailored navy suit and American confidence, surrounded by three distinguished barristers whose silk robes rustle with every whispered consultation. Two legal assistants flank the defense table, their laptops open and documents spread in organized chaos that speaks to serious preparation and unlimited resources. Vance leans back in his chair with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to commanding rooms, his eyes scanning the modest courtroom with barely concealed amusement at finding himself in such an antiquated setting. The contrast between the two men strikes every observer in the small gallery. Rowley sits with the perfect stillness that comes from years of ceremonial duty, his hands folded precisely in his lap and his gaze fixed straight ahead. Every aspect of his bearing speaks to discipline earned through service, from the way his shoulders remain squared despite the tension to the measured rhythm of his breathing. Vance gestures frequently while speaking to his legal team, his movements animated and confident as he points to documents and whispers instructions with the casual authority of someone accustomed to having his words carry weight. Vance's initial confidence begins to show the first hairline cracks as the proceedings unfold, and he realizes this isn't just another frivolous lawsuit seeking attention or quick settlement money. The decorated soldier sitting across from him carries himself with a gravity that suggests deeper motivations than wounded pride or financial gain. When Rowley rises to present his opening statement, his voice carries the same controlled precision that defines his military bearing, each word chosen carefully and delivered without theatrics or emotional appeals. The defense strategy becomes clear as Vance's lead barrister addresses the court with practiced eloquence, dismissing the case as nothing more than wounded pride wrapped in legal paper. They cite extensive precedent regarding satirical political commentary and the broad protections afforded to public figures expressing opinions about foreign spending and ceremonial traditions. Vance nods approvingly as his attorney outlines the First Amendment protections that should shield American politicians from legal consequences for their satirical observations, no matter how pointed or personal those observations might be. The weight of representing himself against this legal army settles visibly on Rowley's shoulders. Yet his quiet determination never wavers as he faces the formidable opposition arranged against him. He has no team of assistants or co-counsel to whisper advice or pass him documents, just a single manila folder containing papers that he guards with the same intensity he once brought to protecting Buckingham Palace. His military training serves him well in this civilian battlefield, teaching him to remain calm under pressure and trust in preparation over theatrics. Judge Margaret Thornton observes the proceedings with the careful attention of someone who has seen countless cases but recognizes something unusual in the claims being presented and the man presenting them. Her eyes move frequently between Vance's confident legal team and Rowley's solitary figure, noting the stark difference in resources while paying particular attention to the plaintiff's composed demeanor. The unusual nature of the claims adds another layer of complexity to proceedings that were expected to be straightforward, creating an atmosphere of anticipation that fills the small courtroom. Vance's moment of expected vindication arrives when his attorney presents the video clip of his satirical comments about royal guards being well-dressed lawn ornaments who stand there all day doing nothing but looking pretty for tourists. The defense team clearly expects this evidence to demonstrate the obviously hyperbolic nature of political commentary that no reasonable person would take as serious factual claims about individual guards or their actual duties. Vance himself leans forward slightly, anticipating quick vindication from a court that would surely recognize protected satirical speech when presented so clearly. The tension escalates dramatically when Judge Thornton reminds Vance that this is a courtroom, not a press conference, after he attempts to address the gallery directly during a break in testimony. "Mr. Vance, I'll remind you that this is a court of law, not a press conference," she states firmly, her voice carrying decades of authority that immediately shifts the room's atmosphere. The rebuke catches Vance visibly off guard, his confident demeanor faltering for the first time since entering the courthouse that morning. What happens next transforms the entire proceeding as Judge Thornton allows Rowley to present his rebuttal under oath, setting the stage for testimony that will change everything about how this case is perceived. "Mr. Rowley, you may respond when ready," she announces, using the formal courtesy that British courts extend to self-represented litigants while maintaining the gravity appropriate to sworn testimony. The silence that follows her words isn't hesitation on Rowley's part, but rather the precision of a man who has been waiting years for this exact moment. Rowley rises from his seat with the same measured movements that have defined his military service, his hand moving to straighten his uniform tunic in a gesture so automatic it speaks to decades of ingrained habit. The courtroom holds its collective breath as he approaches the witness stand, carrying with him secrets that have remained buried for 10 long years, but are about to emerge into the harsh light of legal scrutiny. What Rowley reveals next transforms him from a silent sentinel into an unlikely hero whose actions prevented an international crisis. His voice remains steady as he begins his testimony, each word measured and precise, like the movements that have defined his ceremonial duties for over a decade. The courtroom falls completely silent as Rowley describes events that occurred during what appeared to be a routine changing of the guard ceremony at Windsor Castle on March 17, 2014. The ceremony had proceeded exactly as planned for the first 20 minutes, with tourists gathering behind the familiar barriers to witness the ancient ritual. Rowley stood at his assigned position near the castle's main entrance, his attention focused on maintaining the perfect stillness that the role demands. What happened next demonstrated the difference between ceremony and genuine security work, as Rowley noticed something that everyone else in the crowd had missed completely. Among the sea of excited tourists stood a man whose behavior struck Rowley as distinctly wrong. The individual wore what appeared to be an official Ministry of Defense contractor badge, but something about its appearance seemed outdated compared to the current security credentials that Rowley saw regularly during his duties. More troubling was the man's focus, which seemed entirely divorced from the ceremonial spectacle. While other spectators pointed cameras at the guards, this individual kept his gaze fixed on a specific person within the crowd rather than the ceremony itself. The split-second decision that broke protocol came when Rowley's training overcame his ceremonial obligations, forcing him to abandon his post in a way that violated everything he had been taught about maintaining formation during public duties. Breaking formation during a public ceremony represented a serious breach of protocol that could have ended his career, but Rowley chose to investigate the threat rather than maintain the perfect stillness that his role required. His approach to the suspicious individual revealed equipment that confirmed every one of his worst fears. Hidden beneath the man's jacket was a concealed recording device of professional quality, detailed floor plans of a nearby diplomatic residence folded carefully in his pocket, and components for an improvised incendiary device that could cause significant damage and loss of life. The discovery validated Rowley's instincts about the genuine threat lurking among unsuspecting tourists. The classified nature of the incident meant that everything that followed disappeared into the shadowy world of national security protocols. MI5 procedures and the Official Secrets Act required absolute discretion to avoid creating panic or revealing security vulnerabilities that could be exploited by other potential threats. The man was quietly detained and removed from the scene without any public acknowledgement of the danger that had been present among the crowd. What Rowley reveals next about the target of this planned attack creates a moment that will shift the entire courtroom's understanding of what they're witnessing. The individual being tracked so carefully by the suspect was a foreign diplomat whose assassination could have triggered an international crisis between allied nations. The suspect had spent 3 weeks monitoring the diplomat's schedule, route, timing, and security detail with meticulous planning. Rowley's intervention prevented what intelligence analysts later determined would have been a successful attack that could have damaged international relations for years. The drama escalates as Rowley presents declassified documents that provide official confirmation of his heroic intervention. The papers in his hands represent years of bureaucratic effort to obtain permission to discuss events that had remained secret since they occurred. Just 2 weeks before the court hearing, following a formal request through his member of parliament, the security service had finally released a communication that validated every detail of Rowley's testimony. Judge Thornton reads the highlighted portion aloud, her voice carrying the weight of official recognition. Corporal Alex Rowley intervention on the 17th March, 2014, conducted without overt force or public disruption, directly prevented a probable attack on a protected foreign diplomat, averting potential diplomatic incident and reputational damage to the Crown. The document continues with praise that had never been made public before this moment, noting that his actions were carried out with exemplary discretion in accordance with national security protocols. The courtroom atmosphere transforms completely as everyone present realizes they are witnessing testimony about a genuine hero who prevented a diplomatic catastrophe while maintaining perfect secrecy for nearly a decade. The revelation exposes the vast difference between the ceremonial aspects of the Royal Guard's public duties and the critical security functions they perform away from cameras and crowds. Rowley's decade of silence suddenly takes on profound meaning as the price of service that extends far beyond the pageantry that tourists see and politicians mock. But the most powerful moment is yet to come, as someone in the gallery prepares to reveal a connection that will bring Rowley's sacrifice into devastating personal focus. A woman in the gallery rises from her seat without prompting, her voice cutting through the formal atmosphere with words that transform everything. "That's my mother," she says, her statement carrying across the silent courtroom. "The diplomat you saved was my mother, and she never told me exactly what happened during her visit to London. She just said that something had occurred and that someone had prevented it from becoming something terrible." The connection between protector and protected, hidden for a decade, emerges in the most unexpected setting possible. Her mother had carried her own version of the secret for 10 years, protecting her family from worry, while Rowley's family carried the burden of the heroism that had saved her life. The woman explains how her mother had mentioned meeting the most professional young man during her diplomatic visit, someone whose attention to detail had impressed her without her ever understanding the true nature of his vigilance. The visiting foreign official whose assassination would have provoked an international crisis had lived the rest of her life never knowing how close she had come to tragedy. She describes her mother's continued respect for the royal guards she encountered during subsequent visits, never knowing that one of them had quite literally saved her life. The abstract legal arguments suddenly become intensely human as everyone present realizes they are witnessing testimony about families unknowingly protected by anonymous heroes. This personal testimony transforms the entire proceeding as the courtroom realizes the true cost of Vance's mockery extends far beyond hurt feelings or wounded professional pride. His dismissive comments had targeted not just ceremonial traditions, but the very people who make invisible sacrifices to protect others. The guards he mocked as decoration had been carrying secrets that protected both national security and the peace of mind of families who never knew how close they had come to tragedy. Rowley's oath of silence meant he could never defend himself against public ridicule or explain the true nature of his service to anyone outside the security establishment. While other public servants could point to their achievements or explain their contributions when facing criticism, Rowley and his fellow guards were bound by protocols that required them to accept mockery in silence. The very discretion that made them effective in their protective role also made them vulnerable to the kind of casual dismissal that Vance had delivered so confidently. The moment arrives when everyone understands this lawsuit isn't about money, but about honor, truth, and the invisible sacrifices that protect us all from dangers we never see coming. Rowley's voice remains steady as he addresses the court directly, explaining his motivations in words that cut through all the legal complexity. "I didn't bring this lawsuit because I needed money or recognition," he states, his military bearing unchanged despite the emotional weight of the moment. "I brought it because your words, your joke, were used to diminish something we were specifically asked to protect." The silence that follows his statement carries the weight of recognition that spreads through every corner of the courtroom. The press representatives, trained to chase noise and confrontation, seem to understand that some moments require quiet respect rather than aggressive questioning. Even Vance's legal team appears to grasp that they are witnessing something that transcends ordinary civil litigation and enters the realm of moral accountability. Vance's visible shock registers across his face as his confident dismissal crumbles in the face of documented heroism that no amount of political spin can minimize or explain away. The color drains from his cheeks as he realizes that his satirical comments about well-dressed lawn ornaments have just been revealed as attacks on someone who genuinely risked his career to save a life. His legal team scrambles through their papers, searching for some way to respond to testimony they had never anticipated or prepared to counter. The emotional intensity builds as the weight of Rowley's decade-long silence becomes clear to everyone present in the small courtroom. For 10 years, he had carried the burden of this incident alone, unable to speak about his actions or defend himself against any criticism of his service. The oath of silence that had protected national security protocols had also isolated him from the recognition that his heroism deserved, leaving him vulnerable to exactly the kind of mockery that Vance had delivered so confidently. What happens next will determine whether truth can triumph over political spin as both men face the consequences of choices that have brought them to this moment. Rowley has broken his silence to demand recognition for service that was never supposed to be acknowledged publicly, while Vance must now confront the reality that his satirical comments targeted genuine heroes whose sacrifices had remained hidden only because their effectiveness depended on secrecy. The courtroom atmosphere has shifted completely, and the narrative can never be reversed. Judge Thornton appears deeply affected by what she has witnessed, her practiced judicial composure unable to completely mask the impact of the testimony. The formal protocols of the courtroom feel inadequate to contain the human drama that has just unfolded before her eyes. The weight of Rowley's testimony hangs in the air like smoke after a fire, transforming what began as a straightforward defamation case into something that will be remembered long after the legal proceedings conclude. Vance's legal team scrambles to respond to testimony they never saw coming, their confident preparation reduced to frantic whispers and hastily shuffled papers. The lead barrister, who had spoken so eloquently about satirical political commentary and First Amendment protections, now faces the impossible task of defending mockery directed at documented heroism. His carefully prepared arguments about hyperbolic political speech seem suddenly inadequate when measured against classified documents that confirm genuine acts of valor. The team huddles around their client, voices hushed as they realize their standard playbook offers no guidance for this unprecedented situation. The suspense builds around Judge Thornton's reaction and the implications stretching far beyond this small London courtroom for both men's futures. Her experience presiding over countless civil cases has taught her to recognize moments when legal proceedings transcend mere litigation and enter the realm of moral reckoning. The documents spread before her tell a story that connects past heroism with present accountability in ways that will influence how both men are perceived for years to come. Rowley rises for his final statement, his voice carrying the same measured precision that has defined his testimony throughout the hearing. "Your Honor, I brought this case not because I sought money or recognition, but because silence became complicity when lies were used to diminish something sacred. For 10 years, I kept my oath, protecting secrets that weren't mine to share. But when someone uses their platform to mock the very service that kept people safe, silence becomes a betrayal of every guard who stands watch while others sleep." His words cut through the formal atmosphere with the authority of someone who has earned the right to speak about sacrifice and duty through lived experience rather than political rhetoric. If silence protects secrets, when must we break it for truth? The broader implications of his revelation begin to settle on everyone present as they consider how many other guards in ceremonial positions carry similar secrets of service hidden behind their public duties. The royal guards who stand at Buckingham Palace, Windsor Castle, and other royal residences suddenly seem less like tourist attractions and more like the thin red line protecting people from dangers they never know existed. Rowley's courage in breaking his silence raises uncomfortable questions about how society values different forms of service and whether the most important contributions often go unrecognized precisely because their effectiveness depends on secrecy. The moral victory that emerges from these proceedings transcends any legal outcome the judge might eventually render in her written ruling. Rowley has already achieved what he came to court to accomplish by forcing the truth into public light and demanding recognition for service that was never supposed to be acknowledged. The financial damages seem almost irrelevant compared to the vindication of speaking truth to power and refusing to accept mockery in silence. His willingness to break protocol and risk consequences has created a moment of accountability that no legal technicalities can diminish or erase. What happens next demonstrates how Rowley's courage to speak has transformed him from a silent guardian into a vocal advocate for truth and recognition. The man who spent years perfecting the art of invisible service has discovered his voice at the moment when speaking became more important than standing silent. His transformation from ceremonial figure to active plaintiff represents the hero's journey in its most essential form, showing how circumstances can force ordinary people to become extraordinary advocates for principles larger than themselves. The weight of consequences settles on both men as Judge Thornton prepares to adjourn the proceedings and retreat to consider her ruling in chambers. Vance faces the reality that his satirical comments have been exposed as attacks on genuine heroism, while Rowley must accept that breaking his silence has forever changed his relationship with the institution he served so faithfully. Neither man will leave this courtroom unchanged, and both will carry the impact of this confrontation long after the legal proceedings conclude. Judge Thornton's final words ring with the authority of someone who has witnessed something remarkable disguised as routine litigation. "I will adjourn these proceedings to consider all testimony and evidence presented. My written ruling will be available within 10 days. The simple formality masks the complexity of weighing legal precedent against moral clarity, satirical speech against documented sacrifice. Both men rise as she exits, leaving them to face whatever comes next with the knowledge that truth has been spoken and can never be taken back. The courtroom doors open, and both men must now confront the world beyond these walls. The media storm erupts as both men emerge into the gray London afternoon, revealing the true measure of their character through how they handle the aftermath. Rowley moves through the chaos with measured precision, his scarlet uniform immaculate despite the emotional weight of testimony, while Vance navigates carefully through his protective barrier of legal advisors, his earlier confidence replaced by cautious, no-comment responses to shouted questions about the revelations. The black taxi waits at the curb with its engine running, and the driver immediately steps out to open the rear door for Rowley with quiet respect. His weathered face shows the kind of understanding that comes from recognizing genuine service, offering a small nod that represents acknowledgement of contributions that don't require applause to matter deeply. This simple gesture embodies something larger about the countless unknown heroes who protect society from shadows, performing essential work that goes unnoticed precisely because effectiveness depends on remaining invisible. Clips from the hearing begin circulating widely across news networks and social media platforms, shifting public perception as people recognize the profound difference between satirical political commentary and documented attacks on genuine heroism. The story spreads with the speed that comes when narrative touches something deeper than ordinary political controversy, carrying weight that extends far beyond a single courthouse confrontation. Vance's political future now bears the burden of having mocked someone whose classified actions prevented an international crisis. Rowley's transformation from silent sentinel to truth-teller represents the hero's return with wisdom gained through willingness to break a decade of silence when silence became complicity. The man who once stood motionless for hours protecting others discovered that sometimes protection requires movement, speech, and courage to confront those who would diminish genuine service. His journey from guardian to advocate demonstrates how circumstances can force ordinary people to become extraordinary voices for principles that transcend personal comfort or professional safety. The emotional understanding builds around recognition that courage takes many forms, sometimes expressed through standing perfectly still for hours, and other times through speaking uncomfortable truths in formal legal proceedings. Rowley's decade of ceremonial duty required the same moral courage that brought him to court, just expressed differently according to circumstances. The guards who stand, watch at royal residences, demonstrate daily courage through commitment to duty without recognition, while his courthouse testimony showed courage through demanding acknowledgement for service that deserved recognition. His silent service and later testimony forced a new respect for the unseen sacrifices behind ceremonial duty. The declassified documents he presented transformed abstract legal arguments into concrete evidence of service that prevented tragedy while remaining completely hidden from public view. His willingness to risk consequences by breaking his oath of silence created space for other unknown heroes to be recognized and honored for contributions that society needs but rarely acknowledges. The understanding settles that Rowley has completed his hero's journey from guardian to advocate, bringing truth to light in ways that will influence how society values different forms of service and sacrifice. His legal victory transcends the specific damages he sought, creating a moment of moral clarity that distinguishes genuine service from political theater. The man who spent years protecting others in silence found his voice precisely when speaking became more important than standing guard. As Rowley settles into the taxi's worn leather seat and the vehicle pulls away from the courthouse, the scene carries a powerful message that honor transcends titles, wealth, political position, or public recognition. The quiet dignity with which he handles both his heroism and his vindication demonstrates that character reveals itself not in moments of triumph, but in consistent choices that define a life of service to principles larger than personal gain. The taxi disappears into London traffic, carrying a man whose courage manifested in both perfect stillness and decisive action when circumstances demanded each response. His story illuminates the reality that heroism often wears ordinary uniforms and performs extraordinary actions without fanfare or expectation of recognition. The contrast between his understated departure and the media frenzy surrounding his opponent speaks to deeper truths about the nature of genuine service versus political performance. What emerges from this courthouse confrontation extends beyond individual vindication to challenge fundamental assumptions about how we recognize and value different forms of contribution to society. The guards dismissed as decoration carry secrets that protect lives, while the politicians who mock them from distant stages may never understand the weight of decisions made in silence. Imagine the secrets behind every uniform you pass, the stories that remain untold because their power lies in remaining hidden, and the heroes who change the world without making noise. Rowley's journey from silent guardian to vocal advocate shows how truth becomes the elixir that completes every hero's transformation. Though Alex Rowley and JD Vance are characters here, the question remains real for every unsung protector who serves without recognition. Military personnel, emergency responders, and countless others carry secrets that protect lives while accepting mockery and silence. Should quiet service be honored as loudly as battlefield valor? What would you do if your sacrifice went unseen for a decade? Consider whether all forms of service deserve equal recognition and what courage really means when measured against personal cost. If this story changed how you see those red uniforms, like and share to honor unseen service.